Lee Na-jung stood at the threshold of the first-class cabin, her posture calm as ever, but her pulse quickened the instant the attendant reached for her ticket. The cabin's amber glow and the soft hiss of pressurized air should have felt familiar. She had spent years inspecting high-end cabins just like this, but today, everything tilted off balance. Jessica Reed, the lead flight attendant, held Lee Na's boarding pass between perfectly manicured fingers. She glanced over Lee Na's plain leather tote and held the ticket up to the light as if it were a forgery. Then, without a flicker of hesitation, she tore it straight down the middle. The crisp white paper fell in 2 shreds. "This seat isn't for you," Jessica said, her tone polished but cold, the ice in her voice sharper than any lounge glass ever could be. The cabin went still. Crystal champagne flutes trembled on their trays. Designer handbags shifted on gleaming armrests. Silk scarves draped over chairs caught the breeze of shocked gasps. All eyes, from the gentleman in row 2 to the elderly couple by the window, swung toward Lee Na. She breathed in, unpacking decades of composure in a single moment. Everyone here had assumed she was some inconvenient inconvenience, an unfamiliar face in their sanctum of privilege. But Lee Na's life had taught her how to move through rooms that weren't designed for her. She lifted the remaining half of her pass, the gold foil of her Skylink membership badge catching the light. "I believe you've made a mistake," she said, voice low and measured. "Seat 2A, window side. I purchased it 6 weeks ago. Confirmed, non-refundable." Jessica's lips pressed into a tight line. She straightened her back and nodded toward the aisle, eyes flicking to a pair of VIPs settling into adjacent seats. One woman adjusted her cashmere shawl with deliberate disdain. The other tapped her sunglasses, as if Lee Na herself were an awkward smudge on the glass. "I'm upsetting our guests," Jessica said. "Please step aside, ma'am." Lee Na's jaw didn't move. Instead, she let her mind drift back 15 years to a cramped apartment in Newark, where her 9th-grade teacher had told her, "Girls like you don't belong in college." Back then, every dismissive glance had carved an armor of determination. Now, inside this floating palace at 30,000 feet, that armor felt as familiar as her handwriting on boardroom contracts. From the corner of her eye, Lee Na caught a flicker of movement. A young man in dark denim and a faded hoodie was already raising his phone, lens trained. Malik Jones, 21, aspiring journalist with a steady hand and sharper instincts. His presence meant this moment wouldn't stay sealed behind cabin doors. Behind the curtain, Elena Torres, a senior operations officer, watched with eyes quieter than the hum of the engines. She lifted her badge and met Lee Na's gaze. A single, nearly imperceptible nod passed between them. Lee Na slipped her wrist toward her blouse cuff where a slender band of polished metal sat hidden. With practiced discretion, she tapped once. In the silent realm beneath the runway, Skylink's control center stirred to life. Encrypted signals pulsed through server racks, silently rerouting operational orders. Up front, the captain's measured voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, please bear with us for a moment. We're resolving a minor systems update. Thank you for your patience." Jessica's composure cracked. Her forced calm gave way to panic. She reached out again, as if to physically push Lee Na away. "Ma'am, you must leave this cabin right now, or I will call security." Around her, hushed whispers caught fire. Lee Na sensed the shift. Confusion, solidarity, a flicker of outrage. She straightened her blazer, letting the subtle pin at her lapel catch the light. A logo no one recognized just yet. "I am not leaving," she said, each word deliberate. "I've paid for this seat, and I'll see this through." A hush settled, the cabin's elegant tension squeezing every breath. Malik's camera clicked on, tracking every expression. Jessica's rigid posture, the VIP's narrowing eyes, the gentle resolve etched into Lee Na's face. Back in operation, Elena tapped a confirmation key. A discreet message flashed to certain executives. "Initiate acquisition protocol for EuropaAir, $2.1 billion offer live." Lee Na inhaled, feeling the familiar thrill of turning the tide. She knew this wasn't about revenge. It was about a moment of reckoning. She squared her shoulders, letting the murmur of first-class society swirl around her like storm clouds gathering. In 30 seconds, she had become the focal point of their privilege, and shortly, she would become the force that would rewrite their future. For now, she remained in seat 2A, composed and unyielding. The torn boarding pass lay forgotten on Jessica's tray table, a flimsy token of yesterday's assumption. In that sealed cabin, full of startled gazes, a new truth had been set in motion. Li Na Zhang, the woman they tried to erase, was precisely the person they'd never see coming. Li Na Zhang settled into a plush leather chair in the VIP lounge at Charles de Gaulle Airport, her posture composed yet relaxed. The soft hum of a grand piano drifted through the air as a jazz standard floated from a corner stage. Warm light filtered through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows over polished marble floors. Outside, a string of aircraft taxied in and out, their engines ticking like timepieces marking her next move. This was Lina's element. Spaces that welcomed influence, rewarded vision, and whispered secrets of opportunity to those who listened. At 42, Li Na had mastered more boardrooms than she cared to count. She'd built Skylink tech from a scrappy startup into a $5 billion juggernaut that powered airline reservation systems across 3 continents. Today's mission was simple: attend the Frankfurt Aviation Summit, finalize a partnership with EuropaAir, and demonstrate Skylink's latest AI-driven scheduling platform. She had rehearsed her keynote, coordinated her talking points, and mentally prepared for a room brimming with skeptical executives and seasoned technologists. Yet, despite a career steeped in high-stakes negotiations, a flicker of anticipation always accompanied her first steps into a space that pulsed with ambition. A discreet champagne cart rolled by, its attendant offering chilled flutes with the practiced ease of someone fluent in entitlement. Li Na declined with a polite nod. She preferred a crisp mineral water when she needed clarity, and today demanded razor-sharp focus. She leaned forward, opening her tablet to review the latest network usage metrics. Passenger load factors rising in Asia, slot congestion easing at key European hubs, and a suspicious dip in satisfaction scores for one transatlantic carrier. The data told a story she intended to rewrite. Moments later, her assistant, Mark, arrived carrying a leather folio. He was tall and efficient in a tailored suit, the kind of second-generation professional whose family had been entrenched in banking for decades. Mark had joined Skylink 4 years ago and quickly earned Lina's respect for his strategic acumen. He set the folio on the side table, tapped it closed, and offered a succinct briefing. Your meeting with EuropaAir's COO is in 30 minutes. They've asked for a demo of the beta scheduling interface. And there's a late request. They want to discuss potential acquisition interest, an exploratory conversation, nothing formal yet. Li Na folded her hands. Acquisition chatter was expected. She'd seeded the rumor last month to gauge EuropaAir's appetite. Her real leverage lay elsewhere, but she'd play this hand publicly only after the pilot had taken flight. Thank you, Mark. Confirm refreshments are on hold until after my demos, and reserve a follow-up on my calendar for tonight's red-eye back to London. As Mark departed, Li Na closed her tablet and allowed herself a brief smile. She lifted her gaze to the runway, where a Skylink-branded airliner sat ready, its livery gleaming in the afternoon sun. That plane represented more than transportation. It symbolized the infrastructure she'd helped build, the intricate web of code and contracts and human ingenuity. It was a visible testament to her dedication. She remembered the first time she'd walked a lounge like this as a guest. Back then, she'd felt like an imposter, surrounded by leather and champagne and executives who glanced at her resume the way they might inspect a dusty file in the corner. They expected her to falter, to reveal that her success was a fluke. Instead, she learned to let her work speak, quiet as the hum of those engines. Over the years, she'd moved from the margins into the center, earning seats at tables where her voice commanded respect. Now, as she prepared to represent Skylink to an audience of industry heavyweights, she felt neither tremor nor doubt, only an abiding commitment to excellence. She had written her own invitation to this world, curating every step from coding marathons in a cramped New Jersey apartment to late-night negotiations in Taipei skyscrapers. No one here would mistake her for an outsider. Her thoughts were interrupted by a discreet chime from her smartwatch. Mark's reminder: EuropaAir COO in 10 minutes. Li Na stood and smoothed the lapel of her navy blazer. She moved toward the lounge exit with deliberate grace, each step echoing softly on marble. A lounge attendant tipped her head, offering a curt smile. Li Na returned it warmly, recognizing the small courtesies that lubricated global commerce. Down the corridor, 2 EuropaAir representatives waited beside a sculptural bench. They rose as she approached. One, a stern woman in a gray pantsuit. The other, a lean man with silvering hair and a clipboard. Li Na extended her hand, her demeanor open yet authoritative. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, her voice carrying the calm confidence of someone who had never known defeat. They exchanged pleasantries, and then she guided them toward a private screening room. Inside, a large screen blinked to life, ready for her demo. As she connected her tablet, the lights dimmed slightly, illuminating her and the interface behind her like a portrait. She launched into the demo, highlighting automated load balancing, predictive maintenance alerts, and a user-friendly dashboard that reduced booking errors by 25% in trials. Her audience leaned forward, jotting notes and nodding at key slides. By the time she concluded, she had not only showcased Skylink's technological edge, but also set the stage for deeper conversations about shared vision, strategic alignment, and yes, potential consolidation. In less than 20 minutes, she'd transformed curiosity into enthusiasm. EuropaAir's COO smiled, his eyes alight with possibility. "Impressive work, Ms. Zhang," he said. "Skylink's platform could be a game changer. Let's talk next steps." Li Na inclined her head, pockets the last of her confidence. As they stood to leave, she allowed herself a brief, private thought. In 30 minutes, they would discover that her ambition extended beyond mere partnerships. She had a far larger plan in motion, one that would send shockwaves through the industry. But for now, she followed them out of the screening room with measured poise, fully aware that power was as much about perception as it was about execution. In this lounge of polished stone and piano chords, Li Na Zhang reaffirmed her rule. Every scene she entered belonged to her because she had built it, code line by code line, until no one could deny it. And later today, everyone would find out just how expansive her vision truly was. Li Na Zhang waited until the last passenger settled before she rose from her seat to retrieve a document from her bag. In a single fluid motion, she unzipped her leather tote and extracted a slim folder containing her EuropaAir partnership agreement. She had every confidence in her rights. Her boarding pass had been confirmed, her seat assigned. Yet the moment she turned, the hallway of privilege slammed shut around her. "Ma'am," Eloise's voice cut through the cabin like a razor under velvet. The lead flight attendant stepped into Li Na's path, her heels clicking in measured cadence. Her posture was a study in discipline, spine straight, shoulders squared, expression unreadable. Li Na held the folder at her side, her gaze steady. "Excuse me," she said, her tone calm. "I just need to—" But Eloise interrupted her with a single backhand motion. "This aisle is for boarding," she said, lips tight. Then, without another word, she placed a hand on Li Na's forearm and gently, but firmly, guided her back toward the center of the cabin. The passengers beside them froze, their private bubbles of comfort ruptured by this breach of expectation. A man in a navy blazer turned to his wife. A child watched from the bulkhead seat, wide-eyed. The cabin's soft lighting felt suddenly harsh, as if the invisible choreography of first class had been sabotaged in real time. Li Na's breathing remained even. She adjusted her weight, pivoting on one heel so the folder stayed securely against her hip. "I appreciate your direction," she said, voice measured. "But I only need a moment to retrieve my paperwork." Eloise's jaw tightened. She leaned in, lowering her voice so only Li Na could hear. "You are causing a scene," she hissed. "Step back, or I'll have to involve security." A slow ripple of whispers swept the cabin. Phones appeared in laps, lenses trained. Li Na sensed the stifled curiosity growing into a storm of judgment and incredulity. She recalled her own childhood, when carriers like this one had seemed like unreachable fortresses. "You don't belong here," a schoolteacher had told her once, years ago. The memory stung, but it also fueled the quiet coals of her resolve. "This is my seat," Li Na said. "Seat 2A. I hold a confirmed ticket for this flight. If you have concerns, I'm happy to—" "Keep it," Eloise snapped, ripping Li Na's words in half. "Our VIP guests paid more." She gestured toward a woman adjusting a silk scarf further down the cabin, as if Li Na were blocking her view of the ocean below. The VIP lifted her head, meeting Li Na's gaze with a mix of disdain and triumph. She inclined her chin slightly, basking in the unspoken agreement that this was her world, and Li Na was an unwelcome interloper. Li Na's chest tightened, the calm surface of her composure stirred by an undercurrent of indignation. Her mind raced through diplomatic red lines she had navigated in boardrooms twice the size of this cabin. She was the executive who brokered multi-million-dollar data contracts, who negotiated labor agreements across 5 time zones, and here, a flight attendant treated her like an ocean buoy, visible, immobile, beneath notice. She inhaled quietly, allowing the cool logic of her business mind to eclipse the flare of her personal offense. "I'm not seeking conflict," she said, voice soft. "I just need a minute to find what I came for." Eloise's eyes narrowed. The standoff hung between them, an unspoken game of wills. Then Eloise turned, clicking her heels twice as she returned to her station. She folded her arms like a general retreating to her fortress, the message clear: Li Na was unwelcome here. As Eloise resumed her route down the aisle, Li Na allowed herself a small, private exhale. Her fingers curled around the edge of the folder. She glanced at her watch, its face concealed under a tailored sleeve. The faint glow of the micro LED tracking signal blinked in the corner, her lifeline to the next move. Across the aisle, Malik Jones raised his phone, fingers hovering over the shutter. Elena Torres stood just beyond the galley curtain, her posture relaxed but alert, as if she were waiting for the precise instant to spring into action. In that moment, Li Na saw herself reflected in their eyes, a solitary figure standing in a sea of privilege, armed only with certainty. The cabin lights dimmed as the captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated while we finalize boarding procedures. We apologize for the brief delay." The announcement hung in the air, a thin veil over the charged atmosphere. Li Na straightened her shoulders. She slid past the snickering whispers, heads tilting like flowers turning from the sun. Passengers leaned back in their seats, brushing away the luxury-lined bubble they had depended on. Reaching for her tote, Li Na found the document she needed, an unsigned copy of the EuropaAir offer letter. She slid it into her folder, then in one decisive movement, tapped the face of her smartwatch. A tiny pulse of electricity ran through the band, sending an encrypted command into the underbelly of Skylink's network. Back in London, servers awakened, rerouting lines of code and unlocking protocols that would pave the way for her next move. In the cabin, the air crackled with anticipation, though no one yet knew why. Eloise reappeared at the front of the cabin, her expression schooled into indifference. She gave Li Na a curt nod, an acknowledgement of presence, but not of personhood. Li Na returned it with a nod of her own, but her eyes lingered on the attendant's name tag and the invisible badge of hierarchy it represented. As Eloise walked away, Li Na leaned back against her seat, letting the cabin's hum wash over her. She caught the faintest glimmer of something shifting, a crew member's frown. a passenger's perplexed glance, the soft click of Malik's camera. A moment ago, she had been simply another wealthy passenger. Now, she was the fulcrum around which the entire first-class cabin had revolved. In that charged silence, Li Na felt the first surge of satisfaction, an almost imperceptible thrill at the prospect of turning this moment of injustice into her greatest victory. The first blow had landed, but the real confrontation was just beginning. And Li Na Zhang was already 2 steps ahead. Li Na Zhang settled back into her seat, folding her hands over the slim folder still clutched at her side. Around her, the cabin's hum of polite conversation faltered, replaced by a crackle of charged anticipation. For a brief moment, she watched Eloise hovering at the front of the cabin, shoulders rigid, as if daring Li Na to break the stalemate. Then the attendant strode down the aisle again, her expression sharpened by indignation. "Ma'am," Eloise began, voice low but unmistakably firm, "you are causing a disturbance. Please step out of this cabin immediately, or I will have to call airport security." The words landed like stones in a still pond. Passengers glanced at one another, uncertainty rippling through the collective air. A woman in row 3 rigidly straightened her posture. A businessman sitting across the aisle tucked his tablet aside, as if bracing for a scene. In that moment, Li Na realized that Eloise wasn't just enforcing rules. She was weaponizing privilege, using her uniform as a shield and a sword. Li Na's chest tightened, that familiar spark of outrage flaring in her core. Beneath her calm exterior, adrenaline surged. She recalled every time a door had slammed shut in her face, in boardrooms, at investor pitches, in social circles that dismissed her credentials with a single glance. She inhaled slowly and let the polished veneer of first-class etiquette reassert itself. "I respect your instructions," Li Na said, her tone steady. "But I have honored every requirement to be here. My ticket, my credentials, my reservation, they're all in order. If you have concerns, I'm happy to provide proof." Eloise's lips curled in a tight smile. She stepped closer, lowering her voice so the murmurs of the cabin could not reach her words. "Our VIP guests have paid significantly more for this cabin. They will not tolerate any delays. Move, or I will contact security." At her back, Li Na felt the shift in the cabin atmosphere. Some passengers leaned forward, eager for spectacle. Others looked away, uncomfortable with the raw tension. A hush descended, broken only by the distant footfalls of Eloise's heels on the aisle carpet. "No one here wants a disruption," Li Na said quietly, letting each word land deliberately. "But I will not be dismissed without just cause." She drew the folder onto her lap, fingers tapping lightly against its cover. A sharp murmur cut through the cabin. A covert photograph snapped. A phone activated. Malik Jones, seated in the second row, angled his camera to capture every nuance. Li Na spared him a brief nod of acknowledgement, her silent thanks for his vigilance. On the other side, Elena Torres leaned forward, her eyes locked on Li Na's own, conveying reassurance without a single syllable. Eloise let out a sigh that seemed almost performative. "Very well," she said, raising her voice just enough for the cabin PA to pick up. "Cabin crew, prepare to escort this passenger out. Notify ground security immediately." A collective intake of breath echoed through the cabin. Li Na's heart hammered in response, not from fear, but from the fierce certainty that this moment was her catalyst. She shifted in her seat, crossing her legs with deliberate grace, and opened the folder. Inside was the official letter of acquisition for EuropaAir, freshly signed by the board. She glanced at the header, $2.1 billion offer, a figure that carried the weight of corporate might and personal vindication. Jessica Reed reappeared at the front, posture taut. "Ma'am," she said, "you need to come with me." Li Na rose with unhurried composure, folding the folder under her arm. The flicker of cabin lights danced across her determined expression. She took a single, decisive step forward, and then paused. "Before you do," she said, voice clear enough for every passenger to hear, "let me share something." Heads turned as she tapped her smartwatch twice. The cabin screens above each row flickered, then went dark. A moment later, the overhead speakers crackled to life with a new audio feed. One that was not the captain's voice. It was Eloise's own words from moments ago, clear and unedited. "If you don't move, I will have to call security." The entire cabin fell silent, the attendants included. Gasps and whispers spread like wildfire. Jessica's face drained of color as she realized her private threat had become public spectacle. Eloise froze, blinked once, and then snapped her gaze toward Lena, eyes wide. Lena waited patiently, letting the tension swell. In the control center beneath the runway, encrypted signals had routed her personal recording through the in-flight entertainment system, Elena's precise technical finesse at work. Every word was laid bare for the world to hear. In that pregnant silence, Lena spoke again, softer this time. "I'm not here to shame anyone. I'm here to demand fairness. I purchased my seat, and I will exercise every right that comes with it." The cabin lights brightened as the screens returned to normal. A ripple of applause began at the back row, growing in volume. Passengers who had once avoided eye contact now turned to commend her courage. Malik lowered his phone, offering a thumbs up. Elena allowed herself a small smile before stepping forward to guide the crew. Eloise, visibly shaken, took a halting step back. The luxury of her uniform now felt hollow, stripped of authority by its own words. Jessica, too, looked uncertain, the thread of her composure fraying under the weight of public scrutiny. From her vantage point in Seat 2A, Lena felt the tide shift irrevocably. The escalation she had endured moments ago had become the moment of reckoning. She folded the folder once more, feeling the reassuring bulk of the acquisition letter beneath her fingers. She could taste the prospect of victory, tempered by the knowledge that real change often began with a single, uncompromising stance. As ground security quietly boarded and escorted a flustered Eloise toward the door, Lena remained standing, serene and unbowed. Around her, first-class society buzzed with new purpose, not to defend privilege, but to confront it. And in that charged atmosphere, Lena Zhang saw not just a personal triumph, but the first step in a larger transformation, one that would reverberate far beyond the cabin walls. Lena Zhang leaned back in her seat, the electric hum of the cabin fading into the background as memories flooded her mind. The polished veneer of first class, glowing panels, plush leather, hushed murmurs, dissolved, and she was 15 again, clutching a tattered biology book under the dim glow of a desk lamp in her Newark apartment. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting herself drift there. A cramped room with faded floral wallpaper that had once belonged to her grandmother. Her mother worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table. Her father had long since walked out. Each evening, Lena would finish homework by the light of a single bulb borrowed from a neighbor, her fingers aching from falling asleep on her notebook. The world beyond her window was dark, and the future felt like a distant star. Back then, her dreams carried their own light, code strings dancing across a laptop screen, the thrill of making something work after hours of debugging. She remembered the nights she pitched her first software prototype to investors who nodded politely, then lowered their eyes. "Interesting," they'd say, as though she were describing a hobby rather than a market-changing innovation. One man even leaned across the table, peering at her notes, and murmured, "Young lady, stick to what you know. Leave tech investing to the experts." Her chest tightened at the recollection. The sting of that condescension hadn't faded. It had forged in her a sense of steel. Every dismissal, every sideways glance, hardened her resolve. She'd learned early that success wasn't handed out. It was wrested from a skeptical world that never expected her to win. Lena's eyes fluttered open as the captain's soft voice announced their descent into Frankfurt. She inhaled deeply, letting the slipstream of engines remind her that she was no longer the girl in Newark. She was the CEO of Skylink Tech, at the helm of a company valued at $5 billion, with software running on hundreds of aircraft worldwide. Yet the heat of old wounds still burned beneath her calm exterior. Her gaze drifted to the cabin bulwark before her, the metal frame of the seatback a silent witness to the current storm. The torn boarding pass lay on the attendant's service cart, two rags of paper that had once wielded authority over her. Now, they were nothing more than confetti. She thought next of her ninth-grade teacher, Mrs. Rollins, a retired nurse-turned-substitute who had pointed at her one afternoon after a quiz. "Girls like you don't end up in college, honey," she'd said, thumb brushing a stray hair behind her ear. "Just get a job and stay out of trouble." The words had sunk in like ink, staining her self-image. But instead of retreating, Lee Na had enrolled in every coding club she could find, teaching herself HTML, Java, and Python. She'd endured mocking emails from classmates and condescending offers to help her with the basics. That sense of otherness, of always being too much or not enough, had followed her into every arena. The startup accelerator where mentors patted her on the head and assigned her note-taking duties. The venture pitch where investors steered their questions to male co-founders. The Silicon Valley conference where her name was mispronounced, then forgotten. Yet each cut had pushed her forward. She'd vomited thanks to nerves after her first public keynote, then smiled through the pain and vowed never to feel that powerless again. She'd sat through board meetings where her voice was drowned out, then returned with financial models too compelling to ignore. She'd been turned away from partnership discussions only to sign multi-million-dollar contracts after midnight calls and FaceTime sessions. Proof that persistence could rewrite history. Now, in the quiet roar of their descent, Lee Na felt those memories meld into a single truth. Power was built on scars. And victory tasted that much sweeter when hard won. She straightened her spine, letting the determination settle in her bones once more. The seatbelt sign flickered off, and with it, the final barrier between her past and future. She unbuckled, reaching into her tote for the sealed EuropaAir agreement. The crisp paper carried the weight of every late-night coding marathon and every sleepless worry about funding. As she slid the document from its sleeve, her fingers trembled, not from doubt, but from the thrill of what was to come. A flight attendant approached with a polite smile, ready to deliver refreshments. Lee Na declined again, lifting her hand in a small gesture of thanks. The attendant's brow furrowed as though puzzled by this passenger's choice, but Lee Na simply nodded and turned her attention back to the window. Below, the patchwork of farmland and urban sprawl whirred past as the plane banked toward the runway. Her thoughts shifted to the meeting that awaited her. EuropaAir's boardroom, the skeptical faces, the raised eyebrows at the $2.1 billion acquisition proposal. She knew they'd initially view her interest as another bluff. They'd compare her to other CEOs who'd made grand overtures only to retreat. But she had her leverage. Her software powered a huge slice of their reservation system, and with a single executive decision, she could make them her partners or her subjects. In that moment, a surge of clarity washed over her. This wasn't merely about buying a company. It was about reclaiming every moment she'd been told she didn't belong. It was about standing tall in a world that tried to shrink her. It was about the countless women and minorities who had been told to sit down, take a smaller slice, accept the crumbs of opportunity. And it was about showing them a different path, one forged by grit, guided by vision, and illuminated by courage. She tapped the folder lightly against her leg, feeling the embossed EuropaAir logo under her palm. She allowed herself a brief smile, one of pure, unguarded satisfaction. The cabin might have tried to silence her, but her story was far louder than any uniform's authority. As the aircraft touched down with a gentle thud, Lee Na Jung prepared to step into Frankfurt's early morning light. Her reflection in the window was no longer the wide-eyed dreamer from Newark. It was the image of someone who had turned every no into an engine of possibility. And now, with those engines roaring behind her, she was ready to rewrite the rules, one boardroom at a time. Li Na Jiang settled into her seat with the quiet authority of someone who'd mastered every environment she entered. The wheels of the Airbus slowed on the runway, and through the oval window, she watched flares of runway lights reflect across her polished cufflink. In that moment, nothing about this cabin, not the ivory leather armrests, not the discreet murmurs of the remaining crew, could shake her calm. She'd come too far to be rattled by surface-level hostilities. Her mind drifted briefly to a memory from 3 years ago in a gleaming London boardroom. She'd pitched Skylink's integration software to a panel of skeptical airline executives. They'd studied her suit, her resume, her accent, everything but her plan. When she'd done the live demonstration, the CFO had leaned forward, surprised. "Where did that come from?" he'd asked. Every time she had showed them something unexpected, she gained inches of credibility. But credibility alone wouldn't win this fight. She needed leverage. She closed her eyes just long enough to center herself, then opened them to find Jessica Reed standing at the aisle, clipboard in hand. The attendant's blonde hair was drawn so tightly it was all angles, her name tag catching the overhead glow like a spotlight. Jessica glanced at Li Na's half-torn pass carelessly draped on the tray, then back at her. Li Na gave a nod, not a gesture of submission, but of acknowledgement. Their unspoken contest pressed the cabin air into a taut wire. Jessica spoke, voice neutral. "We're clearing out the cabin now. Please gather your belongings." Li Na extended a hand to her tote, retrieved the slim EuropaAir agreement letter, and placed it on the seatback screen in front of her. It hovered there, a silent challenge in illuminated header text. 2.1B acquisition proposal. A few passengers glanced up, recognition flickering in their eyes. In those moments, she felt the first hint of gravity shifting under the weight of her intentions. She returned her gaze to her wrist, where a sleek smartwatch lay hidden beneath the cuff of her charcoal blazer. The band was titanium, custom engineered by her company's own R&D team. Its face remained black until activated, blending seamlessly with her attire. With the same deliberate precision she used to negotiate seven-figure contracts, she lifted her hand and tapped the watch face twice. Inside the electronics of that watch, a cascade of encrypted signals sprang to life. They whirred through Skylink's internal network, reaching a secure data center in London before pinging the command to activate Operation Europa. That command triggered a silent orchestration of digital maneuvers, temporary reroutes of server priorities, lockdown protocols on EuropaAir's internal communications, and the initial handshake for a master acquisition contract waiting to be signed. Back in the cabin, the overhead screens flickered, drawing all eyes. The captain's earlier announcement had prepared them for a minor systems update, but this was something different. The screens now displayed a discrete message: scheduled maintenance, cabin network, reboot, in progress. Thank you for your patience. Passengers exchanged curious looks. A hush settled, punctuated only by the steady breathing of those still in their seats. Jessica's lips parted as if to complain, but she hesitated, glancing at the screen. The attendant who'd been gathering coffee cups paused mid-step. Even the VIP who had mocked Li Na's presence earlier leaned forward, squinting at the message. Li Na allowed herself a small, knowing smile. She'd replayed this moment a dozen times in her mind. The flicker of surprise, the sudden doubt, the realization that she held more cards than anyone in this cabin suspected. Her pulse remained steady as she tapped her watch a third time, initiating the secondary sequence. Now, terminal systems beneath the tarmac engaged, preloading files that would later prove decisive. Detailed board minutes showing EuropaAir's reliance on Skylink's reservation software, encrypted memos about profit-sharing clauses, and logs confirming a decades-long technological partnership. All of it would surface once the acquisition process moved to the next phase. Li Na leaned back, resting an elbow on the armrest. The soft glow from the screen washed across her profile, accentuating the calm determination in her eyes. In those fleeting seconds, she felt the thrill of innovation, The same thrill she'd felt as a teenager when her first line of code executed without error. This was a different caliber of code execution, but the principle was the same. A hidden mechanism, carefully designed, unleashed at precisely the right moment. A gentle buzz on her watch alerted her that the initial commands had been received. She glanced down. EuropaAir protocol active. It was a quiet victory, one that no one in this cabin would suspect until the time was right. From the corner of her eye, Lena spotted Elena Torres slipping out from behind the galley curtain, her expression taut with concentration. Elena's presence assured her that the technical side was in expert hands. She offered a brief nod in Lena's direction, a silent confirmation that the operation was proceeding as planned. Passengers murmured softly among themselves, speculating about the unexpected update. Jessica approached Lena again, clearing her throat. It appears the network reboot is taking longer than anticipated. I'll let you know when we're ready to proceed. Lena inclined her head politely. Thank you, Jessica. I appreciate the update. Her voice was even, unhurried, an anchor in the swirling speculation. Jessica turned to walk away, but paused at the threshold. She looked back at Lena with something unreadable in her expression. Uncertainty? Recognition that she was in over her head? Lena couldn't be sure. Either way, the attendant's command of the cabin had slipped, if only slightly. Lena exhaled a slow breath, her mind shifting to the next phase of her plan. The acquisition letter was ready, the data was queued, and EuropaAir's CEO would soon find herself with no choice but to comply, or risk losing everything. As the cabin remained suspended in that ambiguous pause, Lena tapped her watch one last time to set the final timing. Within minutes, the true impact of her signal would ripple outward, transforming a simple first-class dispute into a corporate upheaval that no one would forget. She sat forward, steepling her fingers, allowing the anticipation to wash over her. Beneath the polished exterior, her heart thrummed with the quiet satisfaction of someone who knew every part of the machine, but chose exactly when to flip the switch. And now, with a single tap, she had initiated a sequence that would ground the arrogance of privilege and elevate the power of her own conviction. While the first-class cabin still buzzed with confusion, Li Na-Zhang's operation had already leapt continents. In London, high atop Skylink Tech's glass tower, the boardroom lights blinked to life at an unorthodox hour. The threaded glow of early evening receded as executives gathered around a polished mahogany table, digital screens flickering with live feeds from Frankfurt. At the head of the table sat Jonathan Miles, Skylink's chief financial officer. Normally, he'd have reviewed any major transaction for weeks, if not months, before greenlighting a move. Tonight, though, his presentation slides were pushed aside, replaced by a single line of text in bold. EuropaAir acquisition, 2.1B immediate offer. Jonathan pressed his fingertips to his temples, eyes narrowing at the spreadsheets dancing across his tablet. A hush fell over the room as the board members took their seats, some curious, some wary. Jonathan, clearing his throat. This is unexpected. Our original mandate was a strategic partnership, not a takeover. He glanced up at Emma Chen, Skylink's COO, who was already scanning the financial models with rapid precision. Her eyebrows knit together, fingers tapping frantically on her laptop trackpad. Emma, the capital allocations. We haven't prepared for a $2.1 billion outlay at this fiscal quarter. Our liquidity ratios... Her voice trailed off as Lena's soft click joined the meeting via holographic feed. The CEO appeared on screen in crisp focus, charcoal blazer, composure intact, eyes shining with calm resolve. Lena, voice measured. I know this isn't standard procedure, but EuropaAir is the keystone to our expansion in Europe. Their reservation system runs on our software. Bringing them fully into Skylink can unlock synergy worth at least $500 million annually. Jonathan leaned forward, his tone incredulous. Jonathan, you didn't consult the board. You didn't run scenario analyses. Li Na inclined her head. Li Na. I did, privately. Elena Torres ensured we had secure communication channels. She and Mark compiled risk assessments, due diligence files, and a ready-to-sign contract. All that remains is formal approval. Emma exchanged a glance with Richard Patel, the general counsel, whose expression had shifted from surprise to cautious curiosity. Richard, are we certain this proposal is legally sound? A hostile bid could trigger shareholder lawsuits. Li Na's smile was thin but firm. Li Na, our intent isn't hostile. We're already partners. This is a natural evolution. EuropaAir's board will see it as a vote of confidence, not a squeeze-out. She tapped the table beside her image, and a new slide appeared. A graphic mapping EuropaAir's route network overlaid with Skylink's data analytics hubs. Each corridor glowed in orange, signifying traffic volume and revenue potential. Li Na, continuing. Imagine direct integration. Predictive maintenance alerts that reduce aircraft downtime by 20%. Dynamic pricing models that boost load factors. Unified loyalty programs that double repeat bookings. The $2.1 billion is an investment for at least a 30% ROI within 24 months. A soft murmur rippled through the boardroom as Emma adjusted her glasses and studied the projections. Emma, after a pause, if those numbers hold, this could be transformative. But we need to move quickly. EuropaAir's share price is already reacting to rumors flying on social media. At that, Jonathan shot a glance to his tablet. Red tickers scrolled downward. Jonathan, we're down 12% in the past hour. Li Na nodded. Li Na, which is why I authorized the offer now. Delay could mean competitors swoop in. This window won't stay open. She swiped her hand, and another slide displayed a live financial dashboard. Skylink's cash reserves, credit lines, and projected debt service costs against the acquisition price. The figures gleamed in green, reassuringly robust. Li Na, our balance sheet can absorb a $2.1 billion acquisition. We have pre-arranged syndication from 3 major banks, Barclays, Deutsche Bank, and BNP Paribas. Terms are favorable. Richard tapped his chin, evaluating the legal clauses on his screen. Richard, what about regulatory approval? Both UK and EU competition commissions will scrutinize this. Li Na's gaze flicked to the camera. Li Na, I've already engaged with the EU's Competition and Markets Authority. They view this as a technology partnership, not a monopoly risk. Elena organized the liaison. They expect a decision within 6 weeks. Emma exhaled, the tension easing slightly. Emma, then it's a matter of board vote. Li Na's smile returned, a quiet, confident curve. Li Na, I propose an immediate electronic vote. 5 of 7 board members are present in this call. If you agree, I'll sign the contract by midnight, formalizing our offer. Silence fell for only a moment before Jonathan cleared his throat and tapped his tablet. One by one, the board members' votes appeared. Approve, approve, approve. Jonathan, softly, I approve. Li Na inclined her head in gratitude. Li Na, thank you. I know this is unusual, but exceptional circumstances call for decisive action. She tapped the edge of the mahogany table, and the hollow slide dissolved. Li Na, we're moving forward. Prepare the press release. Draft talking points for EuropaAir's board announcement. Elena, execute the final wire transfer. Emma, assemble a transitional team. Richard, notify legal counsel. Jonathan, inform our banking partners. We launch in 3 hours. As she stepped away from the camera, the hollow feed winked out, leaving the boardroom bathed in the glow of their illuminated screens, each executive digesting the scope of the decision they just ratified. Richard leaned back, exhaling. Richard, well, that was explosive. Jonathan allowed a rare smile. Jonathan, it's all so brilliant. And with that, Skylink Tech's most audacious maneuver to date was underway. An acquisition that would reshape an industry and vindicate a CEO who refused to be dismissed. As the boardroom dispersed into evening rush hour chaos outside, Lina Zhang watched from her office window, her reflection merging with the city lights. She closed her eyes for a moment, savoring the gravity of what was set in motion, an unmistakable reminder that true power often lay not in overt confrontation, but in the quiet authority to pull every string before anyone even realized the game had begun. The cabin lights dimmed for a heartbeat before switching back on in an eerie half-flash. Li Na-jung sat upright, every sense alert, as the overhead screens flickered to life. Gone was the EuropaAir logo, replaced instantly by Skylink's sleek silver wing. A bold headline scrolled across each monitor. EuropaAir officially acquired by Skylink Tech for 2.1 B. Welcome to the future of flight. A collective gasp rippled through the first-class cabin. Crystal glasses clinked on trays as passengers awoke from their uneasy silence. Some snapped photos with wide-eyed astonishment. Others exchanged stunned glances. Eloise, who'd regained her station at the front, froze mid-step. Her clipboard clattered to the floor. For the first time, the flight attendant's immaculate composure cracked. She stared at the screen, mouth agape, as if witnessing an impossible twist. Jessica Reed hurried forward, her uniform barely containing her dismay. "What? How?" she whispered, voice trembling. "This can't be real." Lina allowed herself a small, almost imperceptible smile. She leaned forward, resting her forearms on the armrest, and let the muted hum of cabin curiosity fill the space. Every eye now fixed on her, the woman who had refused to be shoved aside. From the back of the cabin, Malik Jones's camera light blinked insistently. He panned across wide-eyed passengers, then settled on Lina's calm face, framed by soft lighting. Elena Torres stood at the service door, her expression composed but triumphant, proof that the acquisition command had reached every necessary terminal. A pause followed, the kind that stretches seconds into lifetimes. Then the intercom crackled. "Ladies and gentlemen," the captain's voice rang out, measured and firm. "We have an important announcement. As of this moment, EuropaAir is officially under the ownership of Skylink Tech. We appreciate your patience during this transition. Please remain seated as we finalize our preparations for departure." A low murmur swept through the cabin. Shock, speculation, disbelief. The passengers who had once muttered complaints now sat rigid, processing the seismic shift. The VIP who had scoffed at Lina's arrival pressed her lips together, eyes narrowing as she studied the new logo. Lina sat serenely, letting the ripple of astonishment wash over her. She remembered when a mere rumor of such a takeover would have been dismissed as corporate bravado. Yet here it was, enacted in real time at 30,000 feet. Eloise finally found words. She backed away, as if unsure where to stand in this new order. I'm sorry, Miss Zhang," she stammered. "I had no idea." Li Na raised a hand, stopping Eloise on instinct. She held the attendant's gaze for a moment, allowing the woman to catch her breath. Then Li Na's voice, calm and measured, filled the cabin once more. "No apology necessary. This isn't about blame. It's about fairness. Thank you for doing your job." Eloise's shoulders sagged, relief mingling with lingering humiliation. She mumbled something inaudible, then retreated to the galley door, sliding inside like someone wishing to disappear. Around Lina, passengers began to stir with newfound energy. A gentleman in a tailored suit leaned over to his wife and said in a hushed tone, "I never thought I'd see a takeover broadcast mid-flight." She chuckled softly, nodding. Out with the old guard, in with innovation. Malik lowered his phone and offered Lina a thumbs up. She gave him a brief, grateful nod, her silent thanks for capturing history. Elena emerged from the galley, carrying a small tablet. She approached Lina and handed it over. On the screen flashed an encrypted confirmation. "Transaction complete. EuropaAir integration protocol active." Elena's dark eyes sparkled with quiet satisfaction. Li Na tapped the screen, then set the tablet aside. She drew a slow breath and let her gaze drift to the cabin ceiling, where the soft arcs of accent lighting traced elegant patterns above each row. In that suspended space, she felt the full weight of what she'd accomplished, and the promise of what lay ahead. A hush fell again as the captain's voice returned. "We will be descending shortly into Frankfurt. Please stow all carry-on items and prepare your seat for landing." The announcement felt almost routine now, overshadowed by the unprecedented news. Passengers complied, folding away blankets and slipping laptops into bags. Yet beneath the ordinary motions, a transformative energy pulsed, a sense that they had witnessed an inflection point, not just in a corporate saga, but in the power dynamics of prestige and privilege. Li Na allowed herself a moment of reflection. She thought of the countless nights she'd spent hammering away at code, the boardroom battles, the dismissive glances, and how each had led to this pinnacle, orchestrating a $2.1 billion acquisition from her seat at 30,000 feet. As the aircraft banked westward toward Frankfurt, Li Na's heart steadied with the familiar thrill of a plan coming together. She reached into her tote for a slender pen and scrawled a quick note on the back of the EuropaAir agreement. "Welcome to the future." She slipped it into the folder, closing it with the quiet finality of a gavel finding its rest. Around her, the cabin's atmosphere shifted from surprise to admiration. A few rows back, a flight attendant from another airline on board, a rare cross-check incident, nodded in respect. The cabin crew, having regrouped, moved with newfound deference whenever they passed Li Na's row. Malik jotted a quick note in his phone. "CEO takes over airline mid-flight. Viral pending." Li Na caught his eye and smiled. He tapped the upload icon. In those closing minutes before landing, Li Na allowed herself to savor the moment. She knew the next chapter would be in conference rooms and press briefings, in legal filings and integration meetings. But for now, suspended between sky and ground, she had rewritten the rules of engagement and taught a cabin full of onlookers that power, when wielded with precision, could reshape the very world they thought they knew. And as the plane descended, every passenger held a new perspective on privilege, and on the woman who refused to let it define her. The cabin settled into an uneasy hush as the news sank in. EuropaAir's livery had vanished, replaced by Skylink's emblem across every screen. Now, in seat 2A, Li Na Jiang watched a tableau of stunned reactions unfolding around her. A gallery of shock, shame, and disbelief painted on first-class faces. Eloise Reed stood near the galley door, her uniform crisp, but her composure unraveling. She caught Li Na's eye for a heartbeat, and Li Na offered only a small, measured nod. No anger, no gloating, just a quiet acknowledgement that the attendant's moment of power had passed. A few rows ahead, the longtime VIP who had sneered at Li Na's presence shuffled uncomfortably in her seat. She pressed a hand against her designer scarf, her eyelids fluttering as she tried to process the reversal. The indignant smile she'd worn now felt like a mask glued tight, cracking under the weight of reality. Jessica Reed, who'd once wielded her elite-class badge like a scepter, stood trembling beside the service cart. She stared down at the torn boarding pass fragments still on its tray, scraps that had once carried the authority to banish a CEO. Now they looked like confetti from a long-forgotten celebration. Jessica's jaw worked wordlessly. Every excuse she'd rehearsed, the misunderstanding, the security risk, had been exposed as nothing more than privilege in uniform. Li Na's pulse remained steady as she motioned for a flight attendant to bring her a glass of water. When the attendant hesitated, eyes wide, Li Na spoke without malice. "Thank you, and please tell the crew to prepare for landing." The attendant nodded, relief mingling with respect. Across the aisle, a man with salt and pepper hair shook his head, leaning toward his wife. "I've never seen anything like it," he murmured. She adjusted her silk stole and whispered back, "It's a reminder. Status means nothing without substance." Malik Jones, seated 3 rows back, kept his phone trained on Li Na. He captured every nuance, the subtle rise of her brow, the grace with which she lifted her water glass, the calm assurance that came with knowing she'd shifted the balance of power. His live stream viewers were already flooding the chat. Legend, karmic justice, history in the making. From her vantage point, Li Na sensed the moment curling toward its climax. She reached into her tote and withdrew a small leather-bound notebook. Inside were the fresh signatures of EuropaAir's board members, official seals that made the takeover irrevocable. She tapped one edge of the notebook against her palm, the leather whispering like a promise. At the front of the cabin, the regional manager of EuropaAir, called up to introduce her name board earlier, had been summoned. He stepped onto the threshold, blinking at the screens above. His bespoke suit looked suddenly out of place, as if he'd wandered into someone else's story. He swallowed and cleared his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, voice wavering. "On behalf of EuropaAir's executive board, I'd like to apologize for any confusion. Ms. Zhang's acquisition offer has been finalized. We look forward to our future together under Skylink's leadership." Whispers of "future together" and "what's next" rippled through the cabin. The EuropaAir manager pivoted toward Li Na, extending a formal bow of the head. Li Na rose, tucking the notebook back into her tote. She offered him a nod, an unmistakable seal of partnership. But the manager's attention flicked to Jessica and Eloise, as though seeking guidance. Both women had sunk back against the galley bulkhead, ashen-faced. Their uniforms mattered less now than their humanity. 2 employees caught in a system they'd once protected, now exposed themselves. Li Na stepped forward and addressed the cabin in a voice that carried the warmth of someone who understood both triumph and trial. "I believe in making this right," she said. "Privilege is nothing without accountability. To that end, Skylink will implement a recall and retraining program for every frontline employee, starting with our flight attendants." A murmur of approval swept the cabin. Passengers exchanged surprised smiles, sensing that this wasn't mere rhetoric, but a genuine commitment. Jospe, the EuropaAir regional manager, cleared his throat again. "And we will honor every existing booking. No one will lose a seat or experience disruption because of this transition." Heads nodded. The VIP woman, whose smug posture had hardened the cabin earlier, now looked down at her lap, tracing the folds of her scarf. Li Na had anticipated pushback, but she had also prepared for resolution. Malik's live stream pinged with notifications. Li Na tapped a finger against her water glass, an invitation for questions. From row 4, a woman raised her hand timidly. "Miss Zhang," she said, voice wavering. "What happens next for passengers like us?" Li Na smiled, pressing her fingertips together. "You'll continue your journey as planned, with enhanced service standards. Every EuropaAir route will now benefit from Skylink's real-time analytics, faster connections, fewer delays, more transparent pricing. This is about more than an acquisition. It's about elevating the experience for everyone." A wave of relief passed through the cabin. Passengers exchanged approving glances, some tapping their seatback screens to review the new route maps. The energy shifted from shock to optimism. Eloise, standing nearby, watched this transformation. Her shoulders, once rigid with authority, softened as she realized the depth of Li Na's vision. No longer a petty enforcer of arbitrary rules, Li Na was guiding a flight to new heights, literally and figuratively. Jessica stepped forward at the same moment, placing her hand lightly on Li Na's armrest. "Ms. Zhang, I'm sorry for how I acted," she said, voice low. "It was wrong." Li Na turned and placed a gentle hand on Jessica's forearm. She met the attendant's eyes and nodded. "Thank you for saying that," she replied. "Accountability is the first step toward growth." Jessica nodded, relief and humility mingling on her face. As Frankfurt's lights came into view below, the first-class cabin hummed with renewed purpose. Li Na's eyes swept one final time across the passengers' faces, some awed, some reflective, many inspired. She remained in seat 2A, yet she felt the entire cabin was hers in this pivotal moment. The EuropaAir manager offered a tentative smile. Malik lowered his camera, the glow of his screen reflecting pride and possibility. Eloise and Jessica returned to their duties, this time with deference rather than disdain. Lina leaned back, letting the thrill of transformation wash over her. The faces in the fire of that cabin bore witness not just to a corporate takeover, but to a profound shift in perspective. And in that crucible, Lina Zhang had become more than a CEO denied a seat. She had become a champion of accountability, dignity, and progress. By the time the wheels touched ground in Frankfurt, the takeover of EuropaAir by Skylink Tech had already ignited social media into a frenzy. Passengers in the cabin, once anxious or annoyed, now scrolled their phones, watching real-time reaction unfold across Twitter, LinkedIn, and aviation forums. The hashtag #EuropaAirGone began trending within minutes, accompanied by a surge of #Skylink shame and #Fairfly forward posts. Lina Zhang remained poised in seat 2A as the cabin emptied. She watched a flurry of notifications flood Malik's live stream, viewers cheering her bold move, analysts dissecting the corporate strategy, and everyday travelers sharing stories of discrimination they'd faced. One viewer commented, "Finally, someone held privilege accountable." Another wrote, "This is why we need more diverse leadership." In the back of her mind, Lina felt a quiet satisfaction. Her message of equity was resonating far beyond these cabin walls. Even before disembarkation, the financial world had begun its verdict. EuropaAir's stock, listed on the Frankfurt Exchange, plummeted 20% in a matter of hours, its ticker symbol flashing red across Bloomberg terminals and financial news crawls. Skylink Tech's own shares dipped 5% as investors grappled with the $2.1 billion outlay. Headlines blared, "Skylink's $2.1 billion bold move triggers EuropaAir crash." "Airline industry upside down, EuropaAir share price halves." "Tech CEO's in-flight takeover shakes aviation stocks." In the VIP lounge at the airport, journalists scrambled to confirm details. Reporters from the Financial Times, Reuters, and CNBC crowded around terminals, their fingers flying over keyboards. Camera crews queued outside the terminal doors, hoping to catch a glimpse of Lina as she exited. A CNBC anchor marveled on air. "This is unprecedented. A corporate acquisition announced mid-flight and executed before landing. Markets are reeling." Outside Gate B12, Lina emerged from the jet bridge to a cordon of flashing cameras and expectant faces. Flashbulbs popped as she passed, signing a quick non-disclosure agreement for a Bloomberg reporter before a queue of TV crews asked for sound bites. She paused, raising a hand to acknowledge the crowd. Reporter, "Ms. Zhang, can you comment on the market reaction to your acquisition?" Lina, "I anticipated volatility. This move wasn't about short-term market swings. It was about setting a new standard for fairness in our industry." A murmur of approval rippled through the assembled press. Meanwhile, travel bloggers and vloggers uploaded videos captioned, "Why a CEO took over an airline at 30,000 feet," and "This is karmic justice in the skies." Their clips wove cabin footage screenshots with stock chart overlays showing EuropaAir's plummet. Lina's calm resolve became a case study in leadership courses overnight, with tweets like, "Lina Zhang just became every business school's favorite example." Back at Skylink's London headquarters, the mood was electric. In the trading room, ticker tape runs flashed EuropaAir's collapse, $14.20 and $11.36 in 90 minutes. Analysts on Bloomberg TV scrambled to draw comparisons to past hostile bids, but none fit this scenario. Skylink's CEO had outmaneuvered tradition with a single in-flight maneuver. Inside the boardroom, Jonathan Miles and Emma Chen watched the barrage of news feeds. Jonathan's hand hovered over the buy button on their repurchase plan, while Emma checked compliance notices from EU regulators. Jonathan, "We're down 5%, but our banking partners are on standby for additional liquidity if needed." Emma, Regulators in Brussels are already commenting on the equity implications. They're calling for an independent review of in-flight deals. Li Na entered the room, greeted by applause from team members who had tracked every moment on live streams. She allowed herself a subtle grin. This had become bigger than any boardroom announcement. Li Na, prepare our investor call. I want transparency. Explain our long-term vision, the benefits for passengers, and how we'll support EuropaAir employees through the transition. As staff dispersed to their tasks, Li Na retreated to her office overlooking the Thames. She opened a secure news aggregator. The Guardian's environmental wing praised the move as an unexpected win for sustainable aviation tech, while the Wall Street Journal questioned the ethics of in-flight corporate coups. Yet beneath the debates, one theme emerged. The public craved accountability. Meanwhile, grassroots campaigns sprang up. On Change.org, a petition titled "Make Karmic Justice Standard in Aviation" gathered signatures by the thousands. Under the global trending topics, Fair Fly became shorthand for corporate responsibility, a tool Li Na had seeded intentionally in her closing remarks aboard the plane. Her phone buzzed. A LinkedIn message from an industry peer, Sky Pulse's CEO Sarah Ningguan, reading, "Brilliant execution. Let's discuss a partnership at your convenience." Li Na tapped reply, fingers poised. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. In the quiet aftermath, Li Na reflected on the broader impact. She hadn't merely ground an airline. She had grounded complacency. She had forced a global conversation on fairness, powered by a viral moment that transcended traditional PR. Every tweet, every market dip, every trending topic was a testament to the power of a single act of courage. As dusk fell over London, Li Na Zhang stood at her office window, watching ferry lights on the river below. She thought of the passengers in that first-class cabin, how their privileged world had abruptly shifted, and of the millions watching online, inspired to question authority in their own lives. The ripples from her in-flight takeover had become waves sweeping across industries. She closed her eyes and allowed herself a moment of quiet pride. Then she opened them, ready for the next phase, rebuilding trust, implementing fair fly standards, and ensuring that this moment of karmic justice would translate into lasting progress for travelers everywhere. Because for Li Na Zhang, success wasn't just about power, it was about responsibility. And now, the world was watching to see how she'd wield both. 3 days later, under the grand chandeliers of Frankfurt's Aviation Leaders Summit, Li Na Zhang took the stage not as a martyr denied her seat, but as a visionary, reshaping the skies. The room buzzed with executives, regulators, and journalists, each curious if the CEO who had orchestrated an in-flight takeover could deliver substance in a formal forum. Li Na stood at the podium, the soft spotlight framing her charcoal suit against a backdrop reading "Fair Fly Alliance, Equity in Flight." The audience, still abuzz from her viral coup, settled into an anticipatory hush. Flashbulbs winked as cameras captured her confident yet approachable smile. She began quietly, letting the weight of that hush underscore her words. "Good morning, and thank you for joining me." Her voice was warm, resonant, rooted in sincerity. "A few days ago, I stepped into a first-class cabin and demanded what was rightfully mine. But today," she paused, sweeping her gaze across the room, "I stand before you to demand something even greater, accountability and dignity for every passenger, at every altitude." A ripple of applause greeted that declaration. Li Na let it rise and fall, then clicked her remote. The screen behind her shifted to a world map dotted with airline routes. Introducing the Fair Fly Alliance, a coalition of carriers, regulators, and technology partners committed to transparency, anti-bias enforcement, and passenger equity. Her words laid out the blueprint. Mandatory anti-bias audits, quarterly reviews of every frontline interaction, check-in, boarding, in-flight service, monitored by independent ethicists, real-time analytics and reporting. Automated monitoring tools flag irregularities in upgrade allocations, service disparities, and complaint resolutions. Then deliver live reports to an ethics council. Passenger Equity Council, a governing body with 50% representation from communities historically marginalized in travel experiences. Open data commitment, publishing summary audit results publicly so travelers can make informed choices and airlines can benchmark progress. As each point appeared, Li Na spoke with clarity. We will no longer hide behind opaque gatekeeping. Fair fly means every passenger, regardless of race, gender, or financial clout, travels with assured dignity. In the front row, an EU regulator scribbled notes vigorously. A group of senior flight attendants exchanged determined nods. Even a few executives from formerly skeptical airlines leaned forward, recognition dawning of both the moral and market imperative. Li Na's tone shifted to a more personal register. Privilege isn't a license to ignore humanity. It's a responsibility to uplift those who've been overlooked. She drew a breath, her gaze steady. I was denied my seat because of bias, but I was also the one in charge of the technology powering that cabin. Today, I choose to wield that technology for justice. A hush followed, charged with respect. Then the room erupted in applause, slow and deliberate at first, then building to a genuine ovation that echoed off marble columns. Li Na allowed herself a small, satisfied smile before continuing. She introduced two guest speakers, Malik Jones, now Skylink's Director of Passenger Equity, and Elena Torres, newly appointed VP of Systems Ethics. Malik stepped forward, projecting clips of passenger testimonials, stories of quiet indignities endured in airports and on flights. Elena followed with a live demonstration of the Fair Fly dashboard. Color-coded heat maps showing service inconsistencies, real-time alerts tagged to specific flights, and anonymized commentary from passengers. Together, they painted a picture of an industry on the cusp of transformation. Li Na concluded with a challenge. By this time next year, I invite you to join me in celebrating 1 million passengers whose experiences were elevated by Fair Fly standards. Let's ground bias and let dignity take flight. As she stepped away from the podium, the applause resumed, this time mingled with whistles and cheers. Industry leaders rose to their feet, some wiping tears from their eyes, moved by the combination of personal courage and systemic vision. Quietly, Li Na returned to the back of the stage, where Malik handed her a water bottle. She took a grateful sip and caught Elena's eye. In that moment, every late-night strategy call, every dismissed proposal, every shard of doubt melted into a single, undeniable truth. She was doing more than winning battles. She was changing the world. In the corridors outside, attendees clustered in animated discussion. A senior U.S. airline CEO proclaimed to colleagues, "We're in. Fairfly's our next big pledge." A veteran pilot nodded, saying, "I've never seen anything like it. This will reshape training for decades." Later, as the summit broke for lunch, journalists approached Li Na with follow-up questions. One asked, "Do you worry any airlines will resist transparency?" She paused thoughtfully, then replied, "Change can be uncomfortable when it shines a light on bad practices, but discomfort is the first step toward progress. We'll work together to make sure Fairfly isn't a threat. It's an opportunity." By the day's end, major carriers from 3 continents had signed letters of intent. Headlines read, "Fairfly Alliance gains momentum," "From cabin coup to corporate crusade," and Li Na Zheng, architect of aviation equity. Social media was awash with testimonials under #FairFly2026. As dusk fell, Li Na returned to her hotel suite overlooking the Rhine. She sank into a chair by the window, exhaustion and exhilaration intertwined. Her phone buzzed with messages of support, from passengers who'd shared their stories, from colleagues across the industry, and from students inspired to pursue careers in aviation ethics. She closed her eyes, letting the city lights shimmer in her mind. She thought of the faces in that first-class cabin, Eloise's shame, Jessica's apology, the humbled VIPs, all part of the journey to this stage. She felt a profound sense of fulfillment, tempered by the knowledge that the real work lay ahead. But for one shining moment, Li Na allowed herself to savor the triumph. The roar of the crowd, the promise of systemic change, and the validation that courage, compassion, and conviction could indeed elevate an entire industry. And as she opened her eyes, she whispered to herself, "This is just the beginning." 6 months have passed since that fateful flight, and Skylink Tech and the broader aviation industry no longer looks the same. The Fair Fly Alliance, once a bold idea born out of a first-class confrontation, has blossomed into a movement that transcends borders, airlines, and boardrooms. Li Na Zhang stands by the floor-to-ceiling windows of her newly furnished office overlooking London's bustling Canary Wharf. Morning light dances on the Thames below, and her reflection, poised, confident, and remarkably at ease, smiles back. She recalls the torn fragments of that boarding pass and how they symbolized more than a personal slight. They were a catalyst for change. On her desk rests a framed photograph, a row of 15 young scholars boarding a FlyEqual-sponsored flight to top universities in the United States. Each face beams with excitement, the very image of possibility. FlyEqual, Li Na's passion project funded by Skylink and its partners, has quietly supported over 130 underserved travelers, offering scholarships, internships, and mentorships. Now, that number has doubled, and the program shows no sign of slowing down. She turns to a sleek tablet playing a live dashboard of Fairfly metrics. Lines of code and color-coded graphs ripple across the screen. Anti-bias audit pass rates have climbed to 92% among Alliance members. Customer satisfaction scores for equity-focused flights show a solid 4.9 out of 5, and complaints related to discriminatory treatment have plummeted by 75%. These numbers aren't just data points. They're proof that dignity, once enshrined in policy, translates into a better travel experience for everyone. Her phone buzzes with news alerts. Major carriers in Asia and South America have just signed on to Fairfly, pledging quarterly transparency reports. A headline flashes: Fairfly spreads wings across 5 continents. Li Na allows herself a quiet nod of satisfaction. When she first spoke about equity in a dimly lit conference room, few could imagine how far the idea would travel. But for all the corporate accolades, the National Aviation Ethics Award, the cover stories, the standing ovations, Li Na values most the small, human moments. Like the email she received yesterday from a gate agent in Chicago who wrote, "I was one of those who upgraded people based on how they looked. After Fairfly training, I see my job differently. Thank you for helping me change." Or the letter from a mother whose teenage daughter used Li Na's story in a high school presentation on leadership and justice. "My daughter said, if she can stand up at 30,000 feet, I can stand up in my classroom." Li Na keeps these messages in a leather-bound notebook, a testament that progress is measured one life at a time. If you've ever needed a reminder that one act of courage can change everything, hit the like button and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Today, she has one final event before boarding a Skylink flight to Brussels for a shareholders' meeting. As she steps into the lobby, her assistant, Mark, hands her a folder stamped FlyEqual, Next Phase. Li Na flips it open to read proposed partnerships with international student organizations and airlines willing to offer reduced fares for scholarship recipients. Mark watches her with admiration. "It's impressive, Ms. Zhang, how these programs have taken off." Li Na offers a wry smile. "It isn't about how impressive it looks. It's about making sure the door stays open for someone who's never been invited in." She makes her way through a corridor lined with flight schedule boards. A crew member stops to greet her, bowing his head in recognition before adjusting her boarding pass with extra care. Later, she'll take her seat in first class, no torn ticket in sight, knowing that her presence there means something different now. It means progress, not power. On board, she settles into her favorite window seat and gazes out at the runway. A flight attendant approaches with a warm smile and offers her a glass of water, their eyes meeting in mutual respect. Lee Na remembers Jessica and Eloise, faces once hardened by privilege, now transformed by accountability. She hopes they too have found new purpose in Fairfly's training programs. The engines throttle up, and the plane glides toward the sky. In her mind, Lee Na replayed the cabin confrontation, how every glance, every whispered doubt, fueled her determination. She taps her smartwatch, not to trigger a takeover, but to mark departure. It logs a note in her FlyEqual tracker, reminding her to schedule a mentorship call with a scholarship recipient later tonight. As the aircraft soars above clouds, charted maps across her mind. Faces she's met, partnerships she's built, barriers she's broken. Below the wing, the world recedes, but her vision expands. In this quiet moment above the horizon, she feels the weight and wonder of stewardship, that a single act of courage can ripple outward, changing systems and hearts alike. 6 months ago, she was a CEO wronged and resolute. Today, she's more. A steward of progress, a champion for dignity, and a steward of hope for travelers everywhere. And as the sun glints off the wingtip, she closes her eyes, inhales deeply, and whispers to the vast expanse ahead, "This is only the beginning."